yeah, but it'll be fun. Thanks for having me on again, man.
No problem. Hey guys, welcome back to Pistons Talk Podcast. Happy to be joined by Sean Murphy again from Half Court. Sean, thank you for making the time and welcome back to the show, man.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I was just about to tell you how much of a pleasure it was. Didn't realize we were about to go live, but hey, we're here. We're doing it. As Bill O'Reilly once said, we're doing it live.
Shannon Sharp too. I mean, hey.
Yeah, he was doing something live. He needs to make sure that his cell phone is not in his possession at any time, probably.
For sure.
Yeah.
No IG lives over here, you guys. You don't have to worry about that. If I did go IG live, it would probably just be like me talking to my TV, like at a Piston game. Like, well, what the hell was that? Like,
I hear that type of growl in the background, I'll be concerned.
Man, I don't have a dog either. So all joking aside, man, we're going to hell.
Got a nice one-way ticket and a continental breakfast waiting.
I wanted to do something. I want to give Clutch Points actually some credit because they're I like them as a publication.
Yeah, our guy Eric Vincent covers the Pistons for him, so gotta show some love.
Love Eric. Had him on last week.
Poor Eric's the guy. I love Eric.
I feel so bad. So I asked him on 3 weeks ago. I had to cancel last minute. Like, I get it. Shit happens. And then he comes on last week. Bro, he was so raspy. I felt so bad. He said, I'm sick. I was like, he sounded like Barry White. Like, his voice was just so deep. I was just like, and I had him on, Sean, for almost 2 hours. I'm like, what a piece of shit I am.
Oh man, like scumbag Anthony, like Pistons talk all night. Oh, your voice is sore? All right, let's go through the entirety of the Pistons history in the beginning of September when they're not even in training camp.
I don't even remember what the hell we talked about. I think it was mostly just Bleacher Report articles, but honestly, like, Eric's the GOAT. I love Eric.
It's that time of year. It's that time of year.
I know. I thought, like, I texted him. I was like, man, I hope you feel better. And he's like, yeah, I'm feeling better. And I was like, yeah, I'm a piece of shit. Like,
it is coming up quicker than people think, though. They'll be reporting to training camp within a couple weeks. Preseason basketball will be here in about 3 weeks' time. So it's here a lot quicker than people realize.
Yeah, it's gonna sneak up on us really fast, and I'm so excited.
Yeah, I am too.
I don't know about you, but I've been just stretching topics out for like 6 months. It feels like it's just like
yeah. Well, it's like especially when a lot of the league business happens in condensed times. There's not really a whole lot that goes on for that 3-month period, right? And with this Pistons group, like last year when we were coming into the season, it's a lot more, it's a lot more fun, a lot easier when you have a lot of different possibilities and, a lot of different potentials because you think this could be a play-in team. This could be a frisky team. You know what I mean? And then when last year goes the way that it does, and you kind of have to temper your expectations, it kind of tempers what you're going to talk about because it's like, well, I don't want to stretch too far out on a limb.
Right. But what I thought we could do is we're going to play some Pistons Squares, and everyone in the chat watching live right now, you guys can play too. I want to see you guys. I want to see your comments in the chat. I want you guys to play along because I can guarantee you're probably not going to agree with me with some of these, and you might not agree with Sean, but Sean's going to, tread lightly, and I'll take any type of heat if he doesn't get in trouble. I thought I'm just rambling. I thought I got in trouble, and I want to give a shout out to this ticket rep because she scared the shit out of me. Can I read you the text she sent me?
Yep.
I was like, bro, like, she scared me because I've actually gotten like an email from Pistons PR before, and I was like, oh, okay, I won't do that again. Where's she at? I don't want to give her name out though. So I get a voicemail, and she's like, it's blah blah from the Pistons. I was like, oh crap, what did I do this time? She's like, tried calling you. Looks like I missed you. I'm reaching out as a new contact with the Detroit Pistons front office. Bro, I lost my shit. Mind you, she did not tell me she was a ticket salesman. Mm-hmm. Kudos to her. I thought it was someone from the front office. I was like, oh, crap. What the hell did I say? What the hell did I do?
What did I do wrong?
Mind you, it was just a ticket rep trying to sell tickets. I was like, member of the front office. I was like, oh, crap. What did I do? Thank God it was just a ticket rep, but I want to give her a shout out. Kudos to her. Scared the living shit out of me.
Just keeping you on your toes, Anthony. Just keeping you on your toes.
And someone has to. But we're gonna play some Pistons Squares. I'm gonna share my screen with everyone watching live right now. But did want to kind of just share that, man, because I was like, man, like holy shit, what the hell did I do?
Playing Piston Squares with a couple of Piston Squares. This should be fun.
Some Piston sickos.
Yep, exactly.
So we're gonna start with most underrated and then work our way down all the way down to the best role player. So Sean, I want to ask you, everyone on this roster, who do you think is the most underrated player on the team?
Yeah, there's two names that immediately come to mind, but I'm just going to go with the obvious one, in my opinion, and that's Isaiah Stewart. For a lot of his career, people treated Isaiah Stewart like he was a bum, like he couldn't play basketball, like he didn't belong in the league or he didn't belong in this team. But the reality of it is, Isaiah Stewart is one of, if not perhaps the most impactful player on this team. When he plays well, he brings the team to a different level. There were actually stretches, this last season where he was shooting like just under 40% from the 3-point line and was one of the best 3-point shooting bigs, last season in general. And on top of that, I think, you look at, kind of what Isaiah Stewart's been asked to do versus what, his best role is. You would argue that Isaiah Stewart is probably at his best, at least right now, coming off the bench as your backup big, having those significant minutes. Whereas playing the four, although I think there's still some potential there. And I think in those 48 minutes, I think you can at least do a couple of them with him in that position. He's not a starting four, right? So, I think to me, like, I know he's, garnered a lot of criticism, but even from his first year, his motor is just obvious. You talk to anyone, around the organization and they just gush over Isaiah Stewart as a leader and as a guy. And he would have legitimate trade value if he was available on the market today. So to me, at least to me, it's pretty obvious that it's Isaiah Stewart. I'm not sure where you were going to go. Another name that I think would be worthy to bring up is Tim Hardaway Jr. He was a third leading scorer on a team that just made the finals. And I think people are writing him off way too quickly. So that's a couple names that come to mind for me.
Yeah, Ryan Boseman in the chat agreed with you. He thought Tim Hardaway Jr.'s contributions could be underrated. I actually have someone different. I'm glad we don't agree here. I'm glad that I don't have Isaiah Stewart here. I don't know how people are going to perceive this. Maybe I'm a little bit too high on him. Maybe it's the Italian bias. I have Simone Fontecchio, actually.
I like that pick.
I'll explain why. I thought last season when we acquired him, he was a guy that I looked at. I'm like, that's the second best player on a 14-win team. Now, granted, it was a 14-win team. The roster construction last year was the roster construction. But I thought Simone Fontecchio showed not only myself, but maybe Pistons fans that were tuning in, each and every game, if they actually were. This is a guy that could be in the starting lineup possibly, could average 15 points a game, really good 3-point shooter. Like him, just activity-wise, defensively, he does some stuff that I do like. He's not a lockdown defender by any means, but I think he could possibly be kind of like a sneaky, like dark horse guy that could maybe be the third, maybe second leading scorer on this team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, especially like when this Pistons team went from being historically bad to being just normally bad towards the end of the season last year, like a lot of their improvements came from, having Simone Fontecchio on the court. He was able to replicate a lot of the shooting and the scoring, that we got from a Bojan Bogdanovic, showed that there was more to his game than we saw even in Utah. And he was able to stay in front of guys as well. So I think, when you talk about guys who are set up to thrive this season, especially, I look at a guy like Simone because he can start if you need him to, but he can also come off the bench. And in my opinion, the fact that the load is no longer going to be solely on him to produce 3-point shooting, and now he can be another guy in the rotation, I just think it's going to make him even more effective.
Yeah, same here. I honestly think he's probably a player that maybe not every Piston fan is locked in talking about. I know a lot of Pistons fans are very locked in with just the core four, and they should be. The future of this team. But
role players aren't sexy. But
I know. I'm
when
a
you're
sickle.
sickos like
like
us, those are the players you fall in love with.
Like I was just talking to someone, like they asked me my favorite Pistons role player, and I told them Ish Smith, and they damn near like fell off their chair laughing. I was like, "What?" Like I love Ish Smith, love them as a person, and
He
just love them
worked
as
his
a
butt off,
backup.
man. Every single night he came off the bench. His effort was never in question.
No, not at all, not at all. So this one's gonna get a little bit tougher, Sean.
Yep.
It's the
It's when the heat
most.
cranks up.
Yeah, we're turning up the heat. So the next square on this chart is the most overrated Piston. So I'll let you tiptoe around it. Who is the most overrated player on this team?
Yeah, so I'll preface this with saying that I don't think this player, like most overrated to me, doesn't mean that they're bad. This doesn't mean that I think that the hype, isn't justified. What I will say though is I think people talk about Jaden Ivy as a player that he isn't quite shown to be yet. I do think that, especially you look at the situation that he was put in last year, and Monty did fail him, especially at the beginning of the year. I don't think there's any disputing that. However, he did also play a lot of basketball after that first 20 plus games where he came off the bench. And he did have stretches where he shot the ball really well. And then he had stretches where he couldn't hit the broader side of a barn. Right. And so that's really the thing with Jaden Ivy is the consistency. And a lot of people talk about him like he's John Morant, but the real difference between him and John Morant is John Morant doesn't turn the ball over as much, and John Morant finishes at the rim. And Jaden Ivey hasn't really done either of those things on a consistent level yet. Now, I believe he can, and I think his ceiling is super high. And I'm a big believer in Jaden Ivey. So this isn't me saying that I don't believe in his upside. I don't believe that he can get close to being that type of player. But I do think that there has to be a little bit more of an honest conversation about who Jaden Ivey actually is as a player versus what the fans perceive him to be. Because I don't think it's a guarantee that he is the second ranking player in that core four, so to speak. I think Asar Thompson brings a ton to the table. I think Jalen Duren has immensely high upside. I think even Ron Holland, we don't know what he can be. And if his upside is what we think it can be, he'd be a damn good NBA player too. So I just think those are important things to consider, especially if he doesn't develop on the defensive side of the ball. Because if you're talking about the Pistons developing to their identity, that's going to be the most important thing. And he's definitely been below average thus far on that end. Again, this is not me saying I am not a fan of Jaden Ivey. I respect him a lot as a person. I believe in his potential. But the way fans talk about him, he has to fit that bill to me.
So I initially had Tim Hardaway Jr. here, but I was kind of a cop out. I actually just kind of put like a blank face because I had such a
You can't make me step out on the limb and do something like that and then just put a blank face. Come on. I need booze in the chat. That is weak. Boo this man.
honestly, like I'll just say Tim Hardaway Jr. Now I know it's kind of it's unfair to him because he just got here. And maybe Pistons fans aren't familiar with their game. Maybe they're not Michigan fans. Maybe they didn't get to see him play in college. But I kind of think when you look at him as a player, I've seen people say, like, what is he going to do here? Like, he was out of the rotation in Dallas, which, I mean, if you want to have that take, I think the writing was kind of on the wall when you have two elite guards like Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. Probably not a whole lot of room for Tim Hardaway Jr. in the starting lineup. My only thing is, like, he's not a player where I think he's going to come in and average like a steady 20 points a game. Like he might get you 12, maybe 14 if we're lucky. But it's just a consistency thing with him. Like I'm expecting him to have his ups, have his downs, and the ups are going to be all-time high. There's going to be games this year where guy has 30 points and he just can't miss from three. But there's going to be lows where there'll be games where maybe he's just like 0 for 7, has like 5 points, and people are like, wow, why did we trade for that? Like, what the hell? Like, I think that's the type of thing when you ask most overrated, that would be my answer.
Yeah, that's fair. I can't believe you were gonna not give an answer though.
No, I was. I just wanted to kind of get your reaction because I knew I was just like, I'm gonna set him up and not say
Okay,
shit.
you gas. All right, you gaslit me. I appreciate it. That's valid. I definitely agree with you in the sense that I think he's not quite the defensive player that people think he might be. Like he leaves things to be desired on that side of the court, and like I think the reason why he fell out of the rotation in the playoffs last year is kind of up for debate. I personally think that coming back from injury at the time that he did, it's really hard to catch your rhythm again, especially when you're going into playoff basketball, where the entire thing is to get you out of your rhythm. So I think that it was a pretty hard ask. I personally think this will be a good, kind of fresh start for him. And if his role is to be a consistent, spot up shooter, I think a lot of nights he will be able to fill that. And, I think similar to playing alongside a Luka, being alongside a Cade Cunningham, I think he'll get a lot of easy shots. And I think he'll hit them a lot more consistently than other guys that we've had in the past. So, I think that, I think there's a lot of credence to that because, if people are familiar with his career at Michigan, you're not getting the guy from Michigan or you're not getting quite the guy, from his peak in Dallas, but you're getting a solid NBA rotational player. If your expectations are set properly, you're going to be happy with what you get. And again, he's an expiring contract.
Yeah, and you got 3 seconds, and you got Toronto's second, which is probably going to be like high 30s.
Yeah, and I mean the real thing is too is if he comes in and plays well, more than likely you're going to flip him to a team that's contending for for assets and as well to free up that salary. So
yeah, I mean probably to the Lakers for a second. Who knows? I mean, it seems like the Lakers want every shooter that the Pistons have had over it seems like the past 5 years. It's just like I still remember the Derrick Rose to the Lakers rumors.
I think Rob Pelinka and JJ Redick are licking their lips right now.
Yeah. I know this is off topic, but I keep seeing this 2K Bronny James, LeBron James picture pop on my timeline. Like people probably know what I'm talking about, man. Like I can't every time I log on to it was Instagram today. Yesterday it was Twitter. Like that, it just keeps circulating, and I can't stop laughing at it.
Absolute gold. Absolute gold. NBA memes and NBA Twitter as a whole is undefeated.
It really is. So is NBA Central, man. Like he's he's a funny guy. So I think we're gonna have probably the same answer. Who is the best player on this team? And why is it Wendell Moore Jr.?
I mean, obviously, I wish I could say the great Boban Marjanovic, but unfortunately, no longer with us on this elite roster. No, I mean it's Cade Cunningham. I mean he's the one that stirs the drink. He's the one that makes the world go around. He was the number 1 overall pick for a reason. He is very much in that echelon of the Paulos, those top number 1 picks that we talk about. He is that type of player, and I think this season is when the broader NBA audience will be able to get more properly introduced to a Cade Cunningham. And if they make a run, is when I think people will have a more honest conversation about where he fits in the echelon. And listen, I think this year's a test for him as well. Obviously these last few years have been rough, but now he does have some pieces, so to speak. I'm not saying he has the Showtime Lakers or anything, but he does have a competent NBA roster. He does have spacing. And I do think that there is an expectation to see a jump with that. So, I think if there's anyone that can handle those expectations, it's a Cade Cunningham. And I think the thing that, I give him a lot of credit for that I think, not a lot of people talk about is a lot of people want to be a number 1 overall pick, but they don't want what comes with being a number 1 overall pick. But Cade Cunningham from day one has wanted to come in and have the burden of being the franchise leader, of having that on his shoulders. And that's not something to take lightly from a 19-year-old. So, for him now to have a few years experience, to have taken the lumps that he has, I think we're going to see a really good Cade Cunningham this year. And especially if he can stay healthy, I mean, that's really the key, right?
Yeah, it is. I don't think there was any room for debate. No. No shade at Wendell Moore Jr. I was just trying to be funny. Didn't get
and all due respect to like Tobias's and things like that. It should be clear to anyone. This is Cade Cunningham's team.
Yeah. I mean, you don't get a $200 million contract if it's not your team. Like that was a long-term investment. They're expecting him to be one of those guys that's talked in the same breath as like a Luka and a SGA. And I think he has the potential to possibly do it. I really do. I think both of us are extremely high on Cade Cunningham. And
Yep.
Eric and I were talking last week because he was really upset about it. Like, I love Eric. His fandom does leak out from time to time. And he's like, dude, it pisses me off how people talk about him like he's not a good player, like they think that he's like one of the worst first round picks in recent history. Like, no, it's the environment, it's what's been around him. Like,
Yep.
you could argue that this is the best roster he's ever had around him, and his rookie year roster was actually pretty good. You had guys like Jeremy Grant, you had good vets like Corey Joseph and Ronnie Magruder. But like, this is going to be the best roster Cade Cunningham has ever had.
Yeah. I mean, I would akin, not to, talk about football too much, but like, this is like if Bryce Young were to be throwing 40 touchdowns for the Carolina Panthers. If they were, still going through all those struggles, having that, historic losing, but if he were to just be balling out, obviously that's not the case at all, but that's what Cade Cunningham has essentially done. He did things statistically last year that only the best of the best in the league have done. So, again, I just, if you're not, if you're trashing Cade Cunningham, you're either just watching the Pistons as a whole and just trashing the team, or you're just simply not watching Cade Cunningham play.
Yeah, or it's a Jalen Green burner account. Like,
exactly.
That's probably it.
Yep.
Before we do get into the worst starter, I'm gonna give you a couple of minutes to think about this one very carefully. We do have to hear from our sponsors over at Factor Meals, and we will be right back after this message. You guys, I have to tell you about today's sponsor, Factor Meals. Summer's winding down, you guys. Fall's coming. Why not fuel up with Factor's no prep, no mess meals? Meet your wellness goals in time for fall thanks to the menu of chef meals with options like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. So no matter how busy you are, you'll always have time to enjoy nutritious, great tasting meals. Make today the day you kickstart a new healthy routine. What are you waiting for? With 35 different meals and more than 60 add-ons to choose from every week, you'll have a new flavor to explore. Crush your wellness goals this month with dietitian approved meals and ingredients that you can trust. Make your day delicious from breakfast to dessert. Stay fueled with easy nutritious options. Treat yourself to restaurant quality meals that feature premium ingredients like filet mignon, shrimp, and blackened salmon. Keep the kitchen time to a minimum. Factor meals are ready in 2 minutes. No shopping, prepping, cooking, or cleanup. Enjoy effortless support for your lifestyle. Choose from 6 menu preferences to help you manage your calories, maximize protein intake, and avoid meat, or simply eat well balanced. Now, if you guys head over to factormeals.com/pistons50 and use code pistons50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off next month. That's code pistons50 at factormeals.com/pistons50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. And we are back. Shout out to Factor Meals for sponsoring today's podcast. So, Sean, probably the hardest part of the podcast for probably both of us. Who is the worst starter on the Detroit Pistons?
Yeah, this is interesting because the starting lineup is going to be very fluid this year. If I were to take a guess at who is going to be starting opening night, the worst starter on the team is going to be Malik Beasley. I think that he's going to be the one that will slot into that number 2 spot, at least to start the season. He's a solid veteran shooter. He's someone that brings, a lot of, like just consistency and stability, on the offensive side of the ball. Defensively, again, not the greatest, not, someone that brings, a ton as far as the defensive player, but, you look at the fact that he was, one of the contestants in the 3-point contest, this last year. He's, he was on a playoff team in the Milwaukee Bucks and has that type of experience. To me, like, and I know with last year with Jaden Ivy not starting, I know people might be like, what are you talking about? Jaden Ivy doesn't start day one. Well, my response would be, although last year it was, there was a Killian Hayes that there, and, you could certainly make the argument, and then you would be right that Killian should not have started over him. But there's legitimate veterans on this roster now that you could make an argument should be in the starting lineup, at least to start the season over him, just because of the spacing that it allows. And, I think you have a coach that would be more able and more willing to stagger those two and get the ball in Jaden Ivy's hands more. So to me, I think someone like a Malik Beasley will probably be their worst starter day one.
Okay, we have two different answers. Love it.
Yep.
Mine might surprise you actually. You talked about this guy already in this podcast so far, and here it is. And I'll explain to you why. I have Isaiah Stewart.
Okay.
And this is not me saying that I don't think Isaiah Stewart's a good player. I think he's a great player. My thing last year was it felt like they were forcing him to play a role. Now, obviously, he exceeded expectations, I think, being able to stretch the floor and all that good stuff that we've seen out of him over the past couple of years since he's been here. My thing is this. I believe Isaiah Stewart off the bench, 15, 20 minutes a game is more valuable than Isaiah Stewart, 28 to 32 minutes a game. I'd love him, Sean, to play. I'm not comparing the two players, but a Naz Reid role, if you will, off the bench for the Detroit Pistons. Now, obviously, if you want to play him at backup center, the backup Jalen Duren, I think that could be a role where he could just feast on against, guys off the bench, because I think he just has the energy, the hustle, the strength to just bully people down low in the post. If you want to feed him down low in the post, he's shown the ability to stretch the floor. And there were times last year where he was putting the ball on the floor and everyone's like, oh, holy crap, we didn't know that you had that in your bag. So for me, I think he's the, quote unquote worst starter, because I think if you were to start Stu, you're asking him just to kind of be a stretch four when I think there's more layers to his game.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I personally think that he's someone that will probably be in and out of the starting lineup as the year goes along, as they experiment and try to find, that proper combination. I personally think that Tobias Harris is probably more of a 4 at this point of his career than he is a 3. So in my opinion, I think he's someone that would probably start, and it makes more sense to bring Isaiah Stewart off of the bench. So I would agree with you in that light. I don't necessarily think the best lineup for this team is to have Isaiah Stewart at that starting 4. But, again, I think we're going to see a lot of shuffling, a lot of experimentation, especially as the season starts. And I imagine 20, 25 games in, we'll have a much more consistent, Pistons starting 5, at least up until the trading deadline.
Yeah, same here. It's like I like Isaiah Stewart as a player.
Yep.
Like I talked about him this past week because there were some trade rumors coming from Eric Pinekes from Bleacher Report talking about Isaiah Stewart has a lot of value, and I was telling people like he had value on a rookie contract. He has value on a very team friendly extension. People around the league like Isaiah Stewart.
Yep.
He's a good player. It's just I think he'd be more valuable for the Pistons off the bench and kind of like a 6-man or the 7-man off the bench, a backup center, if you will. Now, the next Piston Square is a little bit probably easier. Who do you think is the funniest on this team?
Oh man, I mean, there's honestly multiple different ways that you can go with this. There's a lot of funny players on this team, but to me, when I look at the guy that, there's the most clips, there's the most memes, there's just the, the overall personality. To me, I got to go with Cade. I mean, I think that, y'all got peanut butter and jelly for real. It's something that is going to live on, and Pistons memed him for years. On top of that, the Glizzy Gladiator clip is also just an absolute classic. Like, that just to name a couple off the top of my head, I think Asar Thompson is someone that certainly can contend for that as well. Asar is really quick and witty and sharp as well. And especially when he's getting trash talking around his brother, he is hilarious. But I think at the same time, when you talk about like, at least to me, Cade's had some of the funniest moments I've seen from the Pistons in a while since joining the team. So I got to go with Cade personally.
So mine came down to 2 players, and it was Tobias and Paul Reed. I went with Paul Reed. And
I'm not very familiar with Paul Reed. I gotta I gotta look up some of his stuff. I feel like he
Okay,
might be a player I fall in love with this year.
okay, he's kind of slept on in terms of being funny. So I went down a rabbit hole on TikTok really late at night. He did a lot of podcasts with some credential media members on their it was a Philadelphia 76ers podcast.
Okay, yeah,
Long story short, man, this guy is funny as hell. And John, if you go down the rabbit hole and look up some of his tweets, oh my god, he's gonna be like one of those guys that maybe post-game interview, you got Johnny Kane on the sidelines. He's gonna say some
yeah.
shit. He's gonna say some stuff that he's probably gonna drop an F-bomb. He's probably gonna say shit. Like I was watching a clip of him and he said, I got a technical foul for staring at a referee. And he's like, I wanted to fight him after. And I was like, bro,
If I end up,
that?
yeah, if I end up getting to go back there this season, like that might be the player I try to get in a conversation with if I can. That sounds you color me intrigued, Anthony. That excites me because I'll be honest, a lot of times I just picture like backup bigs just to be, workhorses, come in, do their job. Like, again, don't get me wrong. I like that's generalizing, I know, but hey, if Paul Reed come in and do that and be hilarious, sign me up.
So we do have some breaking news.
Oh yeah, I did see Marcus Morris,
Going to the Knicks.
1-year deal. Yep. Get the rich get richer.
My only Marcus Morris Nick memory is when he bopped some guy in the head with a basketball like super hard.
Oh, yep. Yep.
That's all timer. But shout out to Mook for going to a playoff team.
Yep. I
Don't know
will
how.
say, historically speaking, signings that take place in the middle of September don't really have much of an impact, but at the same time, happy for Marcus Morris, Pistons legend.
Yeah, I know a lot of Pistons fans this summer thought that he was going to come to Detroit. But hey, man, happy for him.
Yep.
So this one, Sean, I did not have a player. It's the most annoying. It is Pistons related, though. I'm going to go first and tell you who I have is most annoying, and you can tell me who you think the most annoying is. So this is Pistons related.
All
the
right.
most annoying thing I have is Bally Sports. Bally Sports to me is the most annoying, and I'm going to tell you why.
We're talking the service, right? Not the people, not our
No.
broadcasting crew.
No, this isn't related to George, Greg, Natalie, Johnny, nobody.
Want to just make that clear up the top because those guys are awesome. The people who do the games, that cover the team, great people, but we are talking the service, the streaming app, the product that is Bally Sports.
Yes. Here's the thing, Sean. The app was perfectly fine. It worked. I didn't have to log in 10 times on my computer, on my phone, on my freaking calculator just to watch a Bally Sports Detroit Pistons game.
Yeah.
Like the app itself is completely broken.
The first 10 to 15 games, I think, last year, just like Pistons fans who didn't have cable just straight up couldn't watch.
Dude, and then here's the thing. And I made a video earlier this summer talking about it. Like, it's not so much that it's Bally. It's the Diamond Sports Group, the company that owns Bally. Man, they are so greedy with RSS feeds. There's a reason why Comcast keeps upping their cable price to watch Bally. Is because these guys charge so much money for an RSS feed to broadcast the team's rights. And it's not just, Pistons, it's Red Wings, it's Tigers. Like Tigers fans, this season, even though Tigers have had just such an up and down season, but they're pretty hot as of late. Like a lot of Tigers fans could just not watch their team. Same with Red Wings and Pistons. Like it's a pirate life over here, Sean. If you know what I mean, you know what I mean. But I mean, I'd rather give Bally $20 a month if they had a functioning application. So that's the most annoying to me.
I don't think you're talking Davy Jones, but I think I know exactly what you mean. I think that's objectively, I think that objectively has to be the answer. I will say, as someone that cares a lot more about NBA media and media rights than a human being probably should, I am fascinated to see just how this develops over the next few years because the Amazon deal essentially fell through. There's kind of some, some litigation and appeals and things that will come through, but essentially that deal is going to fall through. And a lot of teams, throughout the, just throughout the country are starting to, slowly take on the broadcasting rights themselves. We've seen the Phoenix Suns and the Dallas Mavericks both, announce that they're going to be taking on the distribution, and it's going to be free to people in the area. So, in my personal opinion, and again, I know, I know I don't know the business side of it. I know it's, a lot easier said than done. But in an ideal world, if the Pistons were in a position to where they could do that for the community of Detroit and just, the Michigan area as a whole, I think that would be a massive win. I know obviously there's a lot of logistics and things that go into that, but at the very least, if you're going to have a streaming product, people need to be able to know that they can reliably log in, that they can turn on the game and enjoy. Because if you're going to spend that much money, because it is not a cheap investment for someone to have Bally Sports Plus or to have cable. You want to know that it's going to work. And so, although I empathize with the people that work in their tech centers, I know that they're probably not given the proper resources. It's a whole thing that it's a logistical nightmare. But having said that, it's a logistical nightmare that they have to have in check because people want to watch their games. It's their escape.
Yeah. I'd like to see, I don't know, and I know people in the Detroit sports community can't stand this guy, but James Dolan and the New York Knicks have the Yes Network over there. I'd love to see Chris Ilitch just nut up. You got Tigers, Red Wings, and Pistons all in one network. Like, I think that could be something that they explore. Like, to your point, like Matt Ishbia basically said, screw the streaming rights. I'm going to give you guys a free antenna so you guys can watch for free. I believe the Pelicans this year, they're going to be another team that's doing the same exact thing. I think all these media rights are going to just go completely out the window. I just think the way TV is nowadays, everyone's streaming. You got Hulu, you got YouTube, you got a nerd like me that's subscribed to Crunchyroll because I can't get enough of My Hero Academia, or I'm watching Black Clover right now.
That might be the least surprising thing I've ever learned about you, but continue.
Hey man.
Hey, it's all love. It's all love.
Yeah, I know. I think the only other person I actually got to talk with was Spencer. Easy roasted me for like damn near like a month. He's like, you nerd. I was like, shut up.
I will say I tried watching Attack on Titan. I watched about the first 10 episodes and really enjoyed, but then basketball season came around. That's really my only beef with animes, is that you need to essentially clear your entire social calendar in order to be able to watch, because you think watching sports is a commitment, watching anime is like a job.
You're looking at someone that watched every episode of One Piece over here. 3 years, by the way, but hey, I committed.
Yep, you're a monster. But anyway.
I haven't watched it in Japanese. That's how much of a sicko I am. But hey. Read the subtitles, didn't know what the hell they were saying, but hey, man.
Oh, man.
I know.
You're a sicko, but I mean that in the best way.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't feel like watching the news and just get depressed. One of the next scores we have is most potential. So, Sean, who has the most potential on this team?
There's multiple different routes that this could go. Again, I'm torn between two different players on this one. There's one that I make the argument for all the time, so I'm going to go with the other. I'm going to go with the Sar Thompson. Just first of all, this guy came in day one and is, a first or second team all NBA defensive type player. When healthy, when given those reps, he was the best Pistons defender day one, and it was indisputable. He also came in and was one of the best rebounders in the league, led even bigs, like Victor Wembanyama at the beginning of the season in rebounding. His effort is insane. I also talk about all the time, just this guy is an absolute gym rat, and I mean that in the best compliment possible. I tell this story repeatedly just because I think this just paints just the picture of who Asar is. I remember being at a press conference with him, and one of the questions that was asked was, what's been the biggest adjustment, for the NBA off the court for him? And he was like, off the court. Like that wasn't even a concept that registered to him being off the court. Like he is in a gym at all times. He thinks about, basketball. If you listen to him and his brother, talk hoops, they talk about like what it means to be a winning basketball player. Like he is in tuned in that. He doesn't care about the stats. And the thing is we haven't even seen him develop his handle. We haven't seen him develop his jump shot. And he was still showing like 10, 15 plus point scoring nights when he wasn't fully developed in that area. So, in my personal opinion, if Asar Thompson, puts all of the pieces together, we're looking at a first or second team All NBA player. The other player, and I think you probably might have him, is Jalen Duren, is my guess. His potential is through the roof as well. I've talked about that a lot, but I just think, I think Asar's potential is not talked about enough.
Yeah, I went back and forth with this, Sean, and I'm just gonna show you who I have because I had such a hard time, and I have Kate Cunningham actually, and it might
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
kind of surprise. Like most people, they're like Asar, possibly Jaden Ivy, Ron Holland, Bobby Klitman. Maybe if you're like you really buy into Bobby Klitman, which I do. The reason why I have Kate Cunningham is I think some people, maybe in the Pistons community, maybe in just like, credential media community, they're like, well, we already kind of know what Kate is, 22, 23, points a game, maybe 7, 8 assists. I think Kate actually has another gear. I
Mhm.
don't think he's a finished product. I think it would be very foolish to kind of write him off because I think he has a gear where maybe he's averaging 26, 27 points a game. I think he has it in him. I think he defers a little bit too much to my liking. I think he's a little bit
I
too
agree.
unselfish. I think there are times where I watch him and I was just like, dude, you could have just taken it to the basket. You got a mid range wide open. Just be a little bit more assertive, be more aggressive. That's why I have him for the most potential. But I agree with you. Like Asar and Kate are like 1A and 1B with me.
Yep.
Last week when I was talking with Eric, I asked him a question of the effect of choose 3 players to build around long term out of the core 4. And obviously, he did not have a SAR whatsoever. He's not as high on a SAR, which I get. There are some people in the community that aren't. I understand it. But to your point, like if he develops jump shot, develops a handle, like is that Kawhi Leonard? Kawhi Leonard like
Yeah.
he could be really scary if
He's an underrated playmaker. His vision is immaculate. And when you look at like the traits of who are the guys that develop those things, it's the guys who just live in the gym and live for the game. And that's Asar Thompson to a T. And
yeah.
I think your Cade point is absolutely valid as well, especially because I don't think we've even seen, his full capabilities as a defender yet either. And I think he can be really good on that end as well. And especially I don't think we've seen, as a guy like JB Bickerstaff just talk about is, you can play him at the 3 as well. Like you can put him in multiple different positions. So, I think with Cade, there's a lot of untapped potential because there's a lot of different ways he can be used that haven't really been experimented with. And especially when you put, NBA level competent players around him, you're going to be able to explore with that a lot more. So I think there's a lot of credence to what you say. I think the reason why I went with like an Asar or a Duren is because I think there's like, I think they're at like the beginning gears of what they're going to be. I think Cade is a lot closer to being a finished product than those guys, although Cade still has a lot more room as well, if that makes sense.
No, it makes complete sense. Like, because when you talk about Asar, you talk about Duran, like, there are layers to their games where the potential just has not been untapped by, coaching staffs yet, which I
Yep.
think that the guys coming in um, can help them reach that potential. Like, I know a lot of people didn't really recognize it, but Jalen Duren's progression of being close to an 80% free throw shooter kind of got swept under the rug last year. Like, not a lot of people were talking about like the progression of being like an 80% free throw shooter. So I think your answer is spot on. I just had Cade because I think there's maybe a year or two left that he just has not hit. And I think
Yep.
once he hits all the gears, like he could easily, Sean, like average 30 points a game if he wanted to.
Yeah, without a doubt, without a doubt. His, I actually did a pod with Mike Curtis recently. We talked about like the differences between, Luca and a Cade, and like the biggest thing, honestly, was the usage. Is just how much Luca is looking to score, and I think Cade, like don't get me wrong, he gets in those fits where he knows he has to put the ball in the bucket, but at the same time, like you said, He's a guy that's very conscious about getting his teammates going, about getting them involved, about playing, the right brand of basketball. And, that's the mentality you want. But at the same time, sometimes you have to tell your star the right brand of basketball is you getting the bucket because you are the brand of basketball.
Yeah, shout out to Mike. I remember he like left mid-season and the Pistons just so happened to play like Dallas like the next week.
It
And
was literally his first game as he actually tells the story about this exchange on the podcast, not to plug, but it is a hilarious story.
I'll definitely go check out Sean's YouTube channel to go watch that. I know you've had some pretty big time guests I've noticed over the past couple of weeks. So shout out to you, man. That's awesome to see.
Appreciate it, man.
I mean, I get it, man. It's hard to try to like lock in guests. It's just like, man, I was like, who do I want to have on with Piston Squares? Is like, who won't be upset or just like, fold their arms the whole way. I was like, I gotta get Sean. It's
I
just
feel like I'm pretty measured, all things considered.
yeah, it's like there was someone I was gonna reach out to. I was like, no, I said they'll get pissed if I put them in that spot, but I don't want to get them in trouble. So this one I think is a fun question. We're probably going to have different answers.
Yeah, this is the hardest one to me.
Who has the most wasted potential on the Detroit Pistons?
Oh man. I mean, that one's tough. I personally think I would lean towards a Marcus Sasser in my personal opinion. I think he's a player that, as of last year, I don't think we quite saw the full capabilities of what he can do. On top of that, I think in summer league, I wanted to see a lot more of his scoring capability, him as a shooter because I mean, if you saw what he did in college, like he is a smaller guard, but he's more of an off-ball guard and I get that if he's going to work in the league, he's probably going to have to be a little bit more of a traditional point guard. But in
Mhm.
my personal opinion, I think that's taking away from who Marcus Sasser is as a player. I think if they use him properly, and he is in the rotation and they do get him more off ball and set him up more as a scorer. We saw points last year, and I made a tweet that people just clowned on as the season went on where I think it was a night in Milwaukee where he just straight up looked like the second coming of Tyrese Maxey. And, like scoring wise, when Marcus Sasser gets going, and again, this is a lot of NBA players, right? But Marcus Sasser in particular has, that microwave type of scoring ability. And if used right, I think he can be a solid part of this rotation for years to come. If I could also, just see it not working out and having to go to a different situation. And especially it gets a little bit trickier when you have a change in the front office, when the people that are there are no longer the people that drafted you. That kind of changes, their commitment level, right? And also they might not have the same perspective on, Marcus Sasser as a player. But I think that, when you look at of the late first round picks from that draft class, like who are the ones that actually could come in and really produce in the league? I think Marcus Sasser is one of those guys. And I still think he could be a really good really good player in the NBA and a really solid part of this team. I just don't know if they've used him properly.
Yeah, I not to like go on a whole tangent because I've done this on previous pods. I've always felt like the Pistons try to reinvent the wheel with any draft prospect they've had over the last 10 years. I vividly remember Sadiq Bey's rookie year. He was like a corner three specialist. And this year or this summer league, to your point, like Marcus Sasser is not a guy that you want to be a full-time point guard. I think there are moments where he can bring the ball up the court and he can distribute, but not every possession. To your point, the
Mhm.
Milwaukee game, that game lives in my head rent free. He was the best player on the court, and that's including Damian Lillard. Damian Lillard could not stay in front of him. He was just going absolutely berserk. The only reason why the Pistons came back was because of Marcus Sasser. I like your answer. I have a different one. Maybe it's because I'm a little bit higher on this guy than most. And mine is Jaden Ivy.
Mhm.
And I'll explain why with Jaden Ivy. I know we're kind of talking about like most overrated. We had him. I think his potential last year was a complete waste of not only his time, but a waste of a lot of people that tune in, lock in to watch Detroit Pistons basketball games. I thought him getting benched for Killian Hayes, on paper, I was like, okay, you want another defender. Cool. But Jaden Ivy should have been in the starting lineup next to Cade. And I'll give you my reason. There are still question marks with those two. There are still question marks. Can they play together? Do they fit next to each other? Is it a bad fit? I think if you would have started those guys together, you would have a better understanding of, do I need to go out and get another shooting guard, or should I give him a contract extension next summer? That's why I think his potential last year was just completely wasted. Now, his rookie year was his rookie year. Nothing he could really do. Cade getting injured, we understand that. He flourished as a point guard, had a really good rookie campaign, but I thought last season was just a complete waste of his time. And obviously, I know some people may think I'm a Jaden Ivy slappy, which I probably am. But I do like your Marcus Sasser pick. I think that's the right pick. But just for a guy that was like really, really high on Jaden Ivy, telling people like, look out for Jaden Ivy. He may be a guy that the Pistons look to draft if they do fall in the draft. But
yeah,
that's my answer. But I absolutely love the Marcus Sasser answer.
And I wholeheartedly agree that, Jaden Ivey's potential has not been realized. And I think a lot of it is on the fault of the Pistons in certain ways. I think candidly, I think the reason, or I think the way that, Monty Williams, oh my gosh, I just had a brain aneurysm there. But the way Monty Williams handled that situation last year is more than likely the reason that he is not here right now. Right. And, I think a lot of the people in the organization would definitely agree that the way that was handled, it was a raw deal, for lack of better terms. And I think when you look at, I think when you look at one of the reasons why the Pistons have been so patient and why they're taking the slow route, it is because they want to see that potential realized. And they do want to see what a guy, can do if he is handled properly, especially, JB Bickerstaff, who in my opinion was wrongly fired from Cleveland. I think they just needed a new voice, but they got better every year he was there. But regardless, he's in Detroit now. And you look at his experience in being able to handle multiple guards who need the ball in their hands that play, kind of a different play style. I'm interested to see how he utilizes both Cade and Ivy. And I'm looking forward to seeing, if that is something that can be, overcome this season, because again, I agree with you wholeheartedly. There is a lot of untapped potential when it comes to Jaden Ivy, and I hope it's realized in a Pistons uniform, because if not in Detroit, I could definitely see it being realized somewhere else.
Yeah, and then we don't, how Pistons fans go down that rabbit hole, and then it gets toxic.
Yep.
Ryan actually had a very good answer. I want to put it on the screen. Shout out to him. He had Tobias Harris, actually. He's like, am I wrong to say Tobias? He's never, Tobias. He has every intangible to be an all-star and never quite materialized. I like that answer personally.
Maybe throughout his career, but it may be in his first stint in Detroit, especially. But I would say for what you're bringing him in for right now at this stage, he's a veteran. He's like 30 plus years old. He's essentially here on a 2-year deal that you could get rid of at any point in time. He's essentially coming in to be that reliable veteran. I would agree that throughout his career, he probably didn't reach his full playing potential. But one thing you definitely can't say about Tobias Harris, and I actually mean this as like full credit, full respect, he certainly potentially exceeded his earning potential. He earned about $300+ million throughout his career, not to pocket watch, but I mean, one of the most handsomely paid players in the history of the NBA. I think Tobias Harris would say that he's had a phenomenal career.
I know
he might not enter the hall, but he has halls of money.
I know Jeff Teague in his podcast, I think it's called the 520 Club podcast. Like they were saying, like Tobias Harris was the MVP of summer because of the bag he got. Like even though like he kind of underperformed in the playoffs for the 76ers, he still managed to get like 26 million. They're like
he's Kirk Cousins. He's Kirk Cousins.
That's not a bad comp.
He comes out, he gives you exactly what you expect. He's not going to reach the level that you maybe think that he could. He's not the best when it comes to postseason time, but when it comes to getting to the negotiating table, he brings a lot of value. Teams realize it. And even if they're not going for a championship, they realize that he can help them go to another level. Whether he's the same guy that he used to be, we'll see. But unlike Kirk Cousins, he's not coming off of a torn Achilles.
Yeah, that's true. So the next question, I think we could have different answers. Who do you think is the best passer on the Detroit Pistons right now?
I mean, to me, it's it's Cade. I think there's definitely, I will say probably the biggest hole in Cade Cunningham's game is his turnover problem. I think that's something that as time goes on will improve. But in my opinion, as of right now, it has to be Cade. I think the guy that again that I mentioned earlier that is an underrated passer is Sasser Thompson. But personally, as of right now, I think Cade's the best passer on the team.
Yeah, we basically had the same answer. I had Cade as well. I do want to give kind of like a 1A, 1B. I think Jalen Duren. Now, there were times last year where he was bringing the ball up the court and people are losing their shit. But
Yep.
I do believe Jalen Duren has another step in terms of being a pretty sneaky good passer. There were some passes last year where he was finding Asar, cutting back door. To your point, Asar's a really good like highlight real passer, but I think for right now, Cade Cunningham is the best passer on this team. Like
Yeah.
the turnovers to go down, which I think they will. The lane is not going to be as clogged as it was last year, so I do expect those turnovers to go down a little bit. Some of the passes kind of felt forced last season on his part. Could have been just like fatigue, playing close to almost 40 minutes a night. But I think we're both in agreement that he is the best passer. So next we're going to defense. Who's the best perimeter defender in your opinion?
It's Sasser Thompson. With all due respect to anyone else on this list, anyone else on this team, there's solid defenders on this roster. Sasser Thompson has the chance to be one of the best defenders in the NBA. I feel like this is I personally don't think there should be a debate here. It's Sasser Thompson.
Yeah, that's exactly who I had as well. I had Asar as the best perimeter defender. Before he was even on this team, I actually had Isaiah Stewart as the team's best perimeter defender. Even while Killian Hayes was still on the team, I thought Isaiah Stewart's switchability, his help defense, kind of gets slept on from the fan base, in my opinion. I think he's probably the second best defender on this team. I think Cade has the potential to kind of like maybe bump Stu off because we've seen flashes of Cade Cunningham just locking people up. Now, I don't know if it was because last year all of his energy had to be exerted on the offensive end. But I think Cade has the potential to be a two-way guy, in my opinion.
I agree 100%.
So this one is a little tricky. I don't know if we're going to have the same answer. The best rim defender on the Detroit Pistons.
I'm personally going to say today, the best rim defender going into the season is Isaiah Stewart. Now, I personally think the best rim defender, the best rim protector should be Jalen Duren. And I think he has the potential to be one of the best in the NBA. I think he has a chance to be Bam Adebayo 2.0. And I think when the Pistons were at their best this last season was when Jalen Duren was showing his true potential as a rim protector. However, there are a lot of times where, he just makes mistakes, isn't in position, so, makes fouls, gets beat. He's a 20-year-old player. So he is still insanely young, and that's where big men struggle the most. But when you look at like what's the thing that's going to take this team to the next level as a defensive unit, it's going to start with the general on the defensive unit is generally your big. That's the one that leads the communication. I think that's another thing that's kind of underrated as well is when you look at the Pistons last season, especially on the defensive end, just how silent they are. In particular, like no one's talking on that back end, and if you are the center, calling out picks, calling out motion, like where guys are, what you're seeing is really important. And, I think a lot of the issues that they had come down to miscommunication, like miserrant plays. And all it takes is a split second. And that's when, someone can get wide open for a look. And so As of today, if you're asking who's the most reliable rim protector right now, it's Isaiah Stewart because he has the best instincts. He's best likely to get baited into. He is more likely to get beat because he is shorter. Jalen Duren has all the tools and on paper should be the best rim defender. And by the end of the season, I think he will be. But today, it's Isaiah Stewart.
Okay, we have two different answers. I actually have Asar Thompson as the best rim defender on
I
this
like
team.
it.
Now, if you go and look at the numbers, Asar Thompson actually blocked more shots than Jalen Duren, who is the team's center, and he played less games and less minutes. I think when you kind of look at this team's landscape, to your point, you want Jalen Duren to be that rim protector, the best rim defender.
Yep.
When I was watching Asar last year, I was really impressed with just his impact. And you talked about it earlier of just like his basketball knowledge and him just soaking everything up. Like there were times where I think his first game, Sean, against the Miami Heat, he blocked 5 shots as a rookie. Like I think the last rookie to do that was like Rodman.
Yep.
Like he has the ability.
Wasn't that their first game of the season too?
Yeah. He had
Like
5
he
blocks.
came out right out the gate and was just ready to go.
Yeah. Like that kid is so special. Like I told someone a couple of weeks ago that he was an elite defender and they laughed. I was like, "No, he's an elite defender. He's like if he's not an elite defender, he's like this damn close to being one of the best perimeter defenders, rim protectors, switchable defenders. Like I remember him putting SGA in a blender. And
If you don't
SGA did not.
by the way, go listen to Draymond Green. He'll tell you the Thompson twins are going to be on all NBA defensive teams for years to come.
Yeah, like for me, I think he's the team's right now. If you ask me today, best rim defender. He showed the ability to protect the rim, protect the paint. Obviously, I want that to be Jalen Duren. I think he has a step and has all the tools and the potential to be a rim protector. But I think Isaiah Stewart is also a good answer. There were instances last year where he was protecting the rim. He was on the help side, protecting the paint. I think you could have debates about Asar, Jalen Duren, and Isaiah Stewart.
Yeah, I think, and again, I think the Asar answer is really solid as well. I personally think though, again, we talk about Jalen Duren and his development, and I agree his passing, potential is great. There's a lot of things on the offensive end that he can develop in and be a really great player. But in my personal opinion, I think that stuff is meaningless if he doesn't take those steps on the defensive side of the ball. If he takes those steps, that is, in my opinion, the singular thing that takes this team to that level of being in the play-in and starting to make some noise. They'll make more shots than they did last year. Inherently, just from the players on this roster, they will make more shots. But if he doesn't take that step and start to become that rim protector that we all think that he can, it's just not going to matter.
Yeah. It's funny because like some people, I got into it this week, they're not that high on Jalen Duren as a player. And I'm thinking, I was like, the guy can't even legally buy a drink yet.
Yeah, I don't think people truly realize like how young, like he was the first player drafted that was not born when LeBron James was drafted.
Yeah. Like that's insane.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of shows you how old LeBron is too.
And the fact that he was that, and the fact that he is that good for being that young says a lot. But the reason why I speak, that like matter of fact about it is because the potential is that pungent, is that apparent. There's a reason why he was on the USA select team 2 years in a row.
Yeah, I mean a lot of the select guys they're talking like really high, like Anthony Davis, Bam Adebayo, like they're like, watch out, that kid's got next. Like if he puts
he
it
was
all
the buzz of
together.
the select team 2 years in a row.
Yeah. Like I know Pistons fans are very impatient with prospects. They want them to just, be like a Grant Hill, like right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
Not every player is going to do that. players like that are special. But I do think if you stay a little bit patient with Jalen Duren, I believe that there's another gear where he could possibly maybe block a shot a game.
Yep.
And to your point, like if that defense elevates to where, potentially we think he can be, yeah, this isn't a 14-win team. This is a team that's knocking on the door of that 10-9 seed.
Yep. I agree.
So the next Pistons square we have is, who do you think is the most athletic player on the Detroit Pistons?
This one's tough too, because I think there's a few different routes that you could go down. I mean, Jalen Duren is certainly a guy that you could say his athleticism and his bounce over the rim is certainly off the charts, and the way that he moves for, essentially being a 7-footer is pretty insane. I'm gonna, you could go with Jaden Ivy because of his game breaking speed. I still think he's probably the fastest player that I've seen live, and I've seen Allen Iverson, in 04 or 05. I think though, the reason why I lean towards an Asar is because he has that type of speed. He has those types of, hops. But the thing that rounds it out is he also has the control. And when you talk about, like having that game breaking athleticism, being able to hone it and control it is something that not a lot of players can do. Jaden Ivy, as fast as he is, a lot of times plays a little bit too fast. He'll come out and it doesn't even seem like he can mentally keep up with how fast his body is going, right? Jalen Duren, a lot of times he can get caught in the rim or get caught above the rim, and it gets him in foul situations. The way that Asar can still think while being in the air, while being on the fly, and his ability to avoid those fouls and making those mistakes for his age, in my opinion, makes him the best athlete on the Pistons. I think you could go a lot of different routes, but when you talk about like those little things, when you're looking at what separates athletes, it really is those minute things. And I think a lot of like the physical, like the speed, the vertical, a lot of those attributes are so close that it does come down to the control and the ability to hone your athleticism.
We do have the same answer. I had Asar as well. This was kind of just like the Asar row for me. I had such a hard time because I was like, Jaden Ivy's very athletic, but there were plays last year, Sean, where he would go up for a rebound and he would jump over a 7-foot center and tap it back in.
Yeah.
The way he can change his pace in terms of because he's got a very quick first step for a forward, the way he can change pace with just accelerating in his speed, it's something that's God given. Like just the type of athlete that he is. I think it's very rare, and maybe some people think that I'm just overrating Asar.
No,
because you kind of just look at this square and it's been all of Asar this topic, but that's how high I am on the kid. I think if everything works out, Fred Vincent, works his magic and he's a respectable shooter, this is a guy that you got 1A and 1B with Cade Cunningham, in my opinion.
There is a reason why the company Overtime essentially built an entire basketball league around having the Thompson twins in their system. There is a reason why they were followed as much as they were, given the training that they were. And it is because from a very early age, it was apparent that these boys were different. And if you don't see, like he is one of the guys where it is just the most abundantly obvious that his athleticism is off the charts. And then you throw in the fact that he is insanely smart, that he loves the game, that he wants to be the best that he can be. Those are the things that it's like, oh, Asar can be scary good.
Yeah, it's insane, like how young he is, how smart he is as a basketball player. Like you could talk to him about X's and O's, and he could probably tell you what he did wrong immediately. Like he gets frustrated when he misses an assignment.
Yep.
He holds himself very accountable, and his maturity is just something that I don't think a lot of people talk about. Like Asar athletically is just crazy. Want to give a shout out to Ashton because I just saw him pop.
Absolutely.
And shout out to Ashton. Hope you're doing well, man. Haven't seen you in the chat in quite some time. Hope
I'm gonna reach out to you after, Ashton. It'll be good to talk to you, man.
I haven't talked to him in a minute. I'm still supposed to actually bowl with Cannon because he wanted some smoke.
Oh, that'd
And
be fun. I
I
will
haven't.
I will say too, like if we're talking like most athletic, Cade's an underrated athlete. He's more athletic than people expect, especially like in the open court. I think people underrate his athleticism. Is he like is he like the most athletic player on the court at all given times? Not necessarily, but he's a lot better of an athlete than people give him credit for.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Cade is like sneaky athletic. Like you don't expect it. Like there'll be times when I was watching the game last year and like he just yammed on someone's head. I was like, where the did that come from? Like it's just so fat. Like it's not that he's a slow player, he's really methodical, but
Yep,
he has like a little burst of speed where he can just like get to a spot and get past you. It's just insane.
you're not going to speed him up.
Cannon is not better than me. I'm the champion. Like, hey man, I'll take any of you on. A lot of people don't know this. I actually don't know this about me. I actually used to be a pro amateur bowler. I was sponsored by like Storm when I was young.
Hmm.
So I mean, I have 300 games. So if you guys want the smoke, you can get it.
I worked at a bowling alley for a summer, but I did not get good.
Hey man, I get it. So our next Piston square we have is who do you think has the best handle on the Detroit Pistons?
I mean, this is another one. I mean, it is Cade, right?
Oh, okay.
I will say, I think the handle can get, I think one of the areas of his game is his handle can get tighter, but at the same time, I think when you talk about, his IQ, what he can do with the basketball, the ways that he can, manipulate defenders, I think he is one of those players that, especially for his size, is able to, maneuver and manipulate the ball in a lot of different ways. So to me, I'm going to go with Cade.
I actually have Marcus Sasser. Um,
Okay.
I think Cade does have a very tight handle. He has a good handle. I think it actually developed quite a bit
Mhm.
from his first year to even last year. I thought he spent a lot of time in the gym, but I have Sasser as the best handle on this team, and
He does have some nasty moves, I will
Sasser
say.
has like that, you go to the park type of handle, like that and one type of handle where he's just got that thing on his string, man. I mean, there were times where, he was crossing people up this year just with his handle. It can get to the, rim at will because it's just so unique and so good. Like if you respect a good handle, like Sasser's kind of got like that old man's game, like you ball over at the lifetime or at the wide, like
Yep.
it's on a string.
Yep. 100%. He's one of those guys, like, if I'm showing up to a park and, like, we're picking teams, like, solely off of, like, we're playing basketball, like, pickup, he's definitely one of the first guys I'm selecting.
Yeah, same here. So next Piston square we have, Sean, is who do you think is the best shooter on the team?
This one's tough, man, because they actually, they picked up some really solid shooting help in the offseason. I think I'm going to lean, Malik Beasley just because of his overall efficiency, with his volume. I think Simone Fontecchio has a lot of potential to be this answer. And, I think he has a lot of upside on that as well. But in my opinion, if we're looking at, who's the most likely to be their most reliable shooter from day one, I think it's going to be Malik Beasley, in my opinion.
Yeah, Ashton agrees with you with Beasley. That's what he just put in the chat. I actually have Simone Fontecchio. To your point, I do agree. When you look at Malik Beasley throughout his career, he's been a high volume, pretty damn efficient 3-point shooter. Not mad at the Beasley answer. I have Simone. I think there's going to be parts of this season where he's shooting over 40% from three. Now, it depends whether or not he's in the starting lineup or not, which
Mhm.
I think there could be, if you want to score more, you want more of an offensive lineup out there, you want more floor spacing, you would probably start Simone. But I have Simone. I think he's a type of player that could be very comparable to what Bojan was offering last season with the
100%.
Pistons. And it would not surprise me if you see this guy shooting close to 40% from three this season.
Yeah. I'll just say this. Malik Beasley is a guy that they could have paid a good chunk more than $6 million this offseason, and I would not have batted an eye. And the fact that they did get him at that level of a deal for that short term is a steal to me. And, I think Simone, when you talk about, like, I think he has the most room to grow and has the highest ceiling. And I think definitely within the next year or two, there's a very realistic possibility that we're talking about Simone as our best shooter. But as of right now, if we're talking about like who's going to come in day one and be the most reliable, to me, just off of the the sample size that we have, I think Malik Beasley is going to make an impact day one.
Yeah, same here. It I was so high like during the offseason, like I had Malik Beasley like in my like top 10 of like players to go get. And then when I had our friend Corey Woods on the show, he actually told me that like he had some like connections, like his mom was from Detroit. I was just like, it would be pretty cool if he came home, and he did. And I was completely surprised when he did come home. And I think a lot of fans are going to fall in love with just Malik Beasley as the
Yeah.
player. And like, he seems like a pretty good dude off the court as well. He keeps giving like really rare, like Nike sneakers in this city. I was like, bro, like those are a couple $100 sneakers you're just giving away. Like, holy crap.
I think we actually talked about it the last time I was on the pod, but Malik Beasley actually was one of the players that talked about bringing back that Detroit basketball mentality. And, like he knows the atmosphere in Detroit and what that can be. So to have someone, that understands that and wants to be a part of that is pretty significant. So I'm excited to see what he can do this year. And who knows if he balls out, why wouldn't Detroit want to bring him back on on potentially a little bit of a longer term deal?
Yeah, same here. I've always been particularly high on him. I actually wanted the Pistons to draft Beasley over Henry Ellenson, but hey, man, not going to go down that rabbit hole.
Summer League God, Henry Ellenson.
Oh man, uh, man, those
That
summer
old
league,
practice gym just brought a different man out of him.
him
He
and Luke
turned into
Kennard were
Larry
going
Bird when he
crazy.
hit those doors.
Um, next Pistons square we have is best in the paint. So, who do you think is the best player on this team near the painted area?
I mean, Jalen Duren's a freaking monster. Just give him the ball near the basket. Just let him work. He has better. He has immaculate footwork for his size. He has better touch than people expect. You talk about his playmaking and the way that he can get guys the ball around the rim. On top of that, just the vertical spacing that he brings to this team and his ability, in the pick and roll alongside Cade. I think we're going to be looking at those two as one of the best pick and roll duos in the league within the next 5 years. I think, he already just has a lot to his game in that light. And if you see Jalen Duren up close, he makes NBA players look small. Like he makes some NBA players look tiny, which is something that is very hard to do. He is a beast on that side of the court. And, I think as many things that, I have to say about his, the way that he can develop and how much his impact, really can be improved on the defensive end. He already has a lot of impact that he brings on the offensive end. Like he could legitimately just be this on the offensive end for the rest of his career and become and if he became an elite rim protector, that would be more than enough to be all-star caliber. There already would be. Like he just does things naturally where he doesn't have to try as hard as other guys to get 15, 20 points a game. He just being around the rim, his presence, his impact hits him 10, 15 alone.
Yeah, I had the same answer. I think it's hard not to say Jalen Duren. To your point, everything you basically said, like you get him a good, 8 to 5 feet away from the rim, he's probably going to score the basketball. When you actually see Jalen Duren in person, you're like, no way that kid is 20 years old because
Yeah.
he's like his physique and his body, like he's just absolutely chiseled. You can tell he works out like a lot. He puts a lot of work in the gym,
Yep.
All year round.
He's got that bench warmer's birth certificate where it's like, I'm 10, but it's written in crayon with a $20 bill slipped inside. Play ball. He's drinking beer.
It reminds me of my old high school team. They got caught. They had a bunch of kids that say they were seniors, but they weren't seniors. They were like in their like mid-20s.
They were the Bishop Sycamore team.
Basically, before Bishop Sycamore was Bishop Sycamore.
They crawled so that Bishop Sycamore could soar.
Oh yeah, 100%, man. I'm
Great
kind of
Great HBO documentary about Bishop Sycamore, by the way. I would highly recommend. I forgot what it's called, but I would that's a great watch, but entirely off topic, but I don't care. That's podcasting, baby.
no that was that whole Bishop Sycamore thing was wild, but it was so
Insane.
entertaining, so
Insane.
entertaining.
Insane. Well, utter
So
insanity.
so the last Piston square we have is the best role player on
This
the
one's
Detroit
tough too,
Pistons.
man. This one's tough too. I mean, because it almost just kind of depends on like how you define, because it's like it feels wrong saying Asar Thompson's a role player
Yeah,
because what he brings to the team and his overall upside is just that much. But at the same time, a lot of the things that he does, is really solid on that end. I think I'm just going to take the cop out answer, and I'm going to go with Tobias Harris because I think this is exactly why he was brought here, was to be, that stable, solid veteran that they need to go get a bucket, and also to make, the plays on both sides of the ball, to teach the guys on this team what it means to be a winning player. And I think at this stage of his career, being, like going into his, 13th season, he's at this point, I think he is a role player for this team at his best. And, like I think that, you know, Tobias Harris, again, I think a lot of people gave, he got a lot of criticism in his time in Philly for the contract that he was given and for being picked over, Jimmy Butler. And listen, he's, all NBA players, it's part of the business. You're up to criticism. He certainly didn't play to the expectations, but he's not the one that chose to give him a max contract over Jimmy Butler, right? Like that wasn't his decision. How dare him take the money that he was offered, right? But I think in this situation on a 2-year deal where he can come in and, $20+ million a year, be your, probably third, fourth, leading, like fourth option on the offensive end by the end of his tenure in Detroit, and just help and usher those young guys in and help build a culture in Detroit. Like that's why he was paid.
yeah, I think that's a really good answer. Now, some people were probably thinking like, okay, why did we give a role player $52 million? Probably listen to back to this later, but I like your answer. I actually have Malik Beasley as the best role player on
And
this
and
team.
and that's a great answer too. Like I can't argue
Yeah,
with that.
I feel like you could go a lot of different players in terms of just like the best role players on this team, in my opinion, Sean. I think there are so many different players on this team where I look at it and like I think Bobby Klitman could be a good role player this season because I do
Mhm.
expect him to, get some NBA minutes this season. The reason why I do have Malik though is to your point. I know you kind of touched on it earlier. Like there could be instances where Malik is starting to start the season, which I think could possibly happen. He's been a starter, throughout most of his career.
Mhm.
And he brings something that I think this team didn't have last year, and that's legitimate floor spacing and being
Yep.
able to hit a three on pretty decent volume. And I think he's a player that you could plug and play off the bench too if you wanted to.
Yep.
I think he's just a type of player that I'm pretty particularly high on. And when you kind of look at Malik Beasley, some people like are writing him off like he's already 30. He's not. He's
Yep.
still pretty young,
Yep.
mind you. Um, I just really like him as a player. I've just been you just have those role players that you fall in love with during the pre-draft process and you follow them throughout their career. When he was in Denver, we talked about him in Milwaukee. Like he's just been a really good role player throughout his career
Mhm.
so far.
Yep, he is a solid floor spacer that brings, a lot of intangibles to this team that quite frankly they just didn't have. He's available, he's consistent. He knows his role and knows who he is. And when you talk about like, not to keep talking about the pod I did with Mike, but one of the big things, like one of the first questions I asked him was, you were around the worst team of basketball, you were also around one of the best teams of basketball. What are the differences between those situations? What are the differences between a team that is at the bottom and a team's at the top? And one of the things that he said was players knew their role in Dallas. They knew exactly what they were supposed to do. They knew exactly where they were supposed to be. They knew exactly who they were within the confines of this team. Whereas last year, it was all guys having to figure out on the fly exactly who they were. And you have a ton of players not only on this team that are figuring out who they are as basketball players, they're so young, they're still figuring out who they are as people, right?
Yeah.
So bringing in, and the reason why I go with like a Tobias is that's a big reason why you bring him in is because getting successful in the NBA life is a lot more than just a lot of the things on the court. It's having that right guy, those right guys in the locker room. It's building that culture and that camaraderie as a team. It's having that trust, in one another. A lot of the, little things that Tobias Harris is going to bring to this locker room. Right. And I think Malik Beasley is going to bring it as well. So, again, I think there's just the, one of the big secrets about basketball is that it's a lot more than basketball.
Yeah, I think some fans forget that these guys are human too,
Yep.
and they're going to make mistakes.
Mhm.
I think a lot of times they're our favorite team. That's why we talk about them. That's why we're so passionate about it. But you also have to understand the mental part of the game,
Yep.
which I think is actually more significant than the physical part of the game. And maybe some people don't want to hear that, but I always advocate for mental health. I always advocate for, any of these players, like, going through tough times. And most NBA teams nowadays have therapists. They
Yep.
have someone they can talk to. And I think last season was probably the hardest basketball they've ever played. Because you have to think, Sean, a lot of these guys, well, I'll use Cade, for example. Like, Cade was the best player on his high school team, arguably. He was the
They
best player.
lost 20 times in their life coming up to the NBA.
Yeah.
If that.
Like, they've done historical losing since this rebuild. I mean, you can look
Mhm.
at Troy Weaver's record as an executive. It's like 72 and almost close to 300 losses. Like, that can wear on someone's mental state of
Yep.
questioning themselves whether or not they're good basketball players. And you hit on a point that I think is so crucial and important of having defined roles and knowing who they are as basketball players. Because a lot of these guys were the best player, whether it was college, whether it was high school, or even elementary. You know, you go into the NBA where it's the best athletes in the world, and you kind of have to find your niche in this league. You have to find your role in this league. And last year, Monty Williams did not really put these guys in position to be successful. He kind of just threw lineups out there and said, go figure it out. You guys are grown-ups. I'm just gonna, watch on the sideline and see what happens. To the point where, like, your interview with Mike, like, yeah, you look at Dallas, that's a team that's well coached and everyone knows their role. They don't try to play out of their role. They don't try to get cute. They don't try to, I'm going to bring the ball up the court, go coast to coast, and
Mhm.
um, try to get a highlight, whatever. A lot of those players on Dallas know the roles. Last year, it seems like everyone was just trying to get theirs, trying to score because no one was helping them out on the bench
Well, but
whatsoever.
also, like, a lot of guys are just trying to make plays happen because they don't know who else can. They don't know how else to get out of that rut, right? And, I think one of the big things about bringing in a JB Bickerstaff, one of the first things they mentioned in that press conference was bringing back the joy, bringing back the fun in being a basketball player, which, I know that, that can be hard to, grasp for some people of like, this is basketball. How is that not fun? But when the business is so intensified, when the pressure to produce is dialed so high and you are in front of hundreds of thousands of people every single night, putting your product on the floor and it's getting deteriorated, you're losing, you're going through all those things, you need the right person in that helm to be able to manage that. And I think we saw over the last couple of years the difference of when Dwayne Casey was helming this team through that type of losing, and when Monty Williams was helping this team through that losing. Like, say what you will about the Pistons a couple of years ago when they were also historically bad, they were together. They had, like they at least had, like semblance of a plan, and you didn't hear about, factions within, the organization, and you didn't hear about tension in the locker room, like things that were not the case this last year.
Yeah, I mean, Dwayne Casey always will have my respect as a coach and just a human being, because in his time here, he could have just quit after they started rebuilding.
Mhm.
Could have just quit like 100%, but he didn't. And you never heard a player badmouth him. You never got rumblings from Shams Charania that he had to get basically say, "Hey, play this player. We just drafted him."
Yep.
You never saw him during a press conference throw, players under the bus saying, "I don't know. You have to ask him. It was
And
his
he
fault."
never complained a day either.
No, no, like, that's why he'll always have my respect, Sean, because he was just such a good, coach. But this was actually really fun, man. Like,
Yeah, this was fun.
I was scrolling and I saw Clutch Points, and they're doing their Pistons Squares, doing a player day. I was like, we should do like a Pistons themed one, because
Heck yeah.
um it was a lot of fun. Hope I didn't get you in like too much
Oh, no,
trouble.
I don't think so at all. I think I again, and, like, throw in the quantifiers of, you definitely believe in a lot of these people, and I think a lot of those terms can be a little, kinda like, simplistic, but, I think there's, the merit of, hey, these are young players that have a lot of potential and a lot of room to grow. I think it's okay to have honest conversations about that, you know?
Yeah, I do too. I think sometimes it can get toxic,
Yep.
especially in the community that we're in. I think some fans just they bleed red, white, and blue, and I love it. But sometimes they're just so reactionary to any little thing that it can just get so toxic to the point where, like, you're like, I'm gonna log off the internet for the
Well,
day.
and you brought it up a minute ago. There's a yes, these are basketball players, but they are also people. And their ability on the basketball court has no correlation with their value and with their, with who they are as human beings, right? Just doesn't.
Hmm.
And I think a
Yeah,
lot of times that's where the distinction gets lost. Is like, we go, "Oh, that guy's trash," instead of, "He had a bad game." Like there's a difference.
yeah. I noticed it a lot last year. I don't
Mhm.
know about yourself.
Mhm.
Like we were like kind of negative when we won 23 games in Cade's rookie year, but like I guarantee you, fans would probably rather have 23 wins versus 14.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. If they get 23 wins and have a 9-win improvement this year, that would be a success, right? But, again, I think it's, and listen, fans have more than a right to feel, fatigued and frustrated and, want more out of the team and where they're at, because it has been a long time since they've even won a playoff game, right?
yeah,
But in the same right, I think, like you said, there's just a way of going about it, you know?
yeah. So, do you have time for maybe like one or two Q&A questions?
Yeah, I can do 1 or 2 questions.
Okay, so I have two. Actually, I just have one because the other one's just kind of like a crazy hot take, which I don't want to get that guy like roasted. This comes from West Weaver Jr. We wanted to know if we think that the Pistons can get the 6th seed this season.
Man, I mean, I definitely think that, when you look at, like, the overall standings of the Eastern Conference, there are teams with a lot more question marks than clarity than last year. Specifically, you look at the Atlanta Hawks, who were a playing team last year. They went and had the number 1 overall pick, got Zachary Ricochet. They traded DeJounte Murray. The Indiana Pacers made it to the Eastern Conference Finals, but are they quite an Eastern Conference Finals team? Like, is Cleveland going to take the next step? Things like that. So there is still a lot of depth, but there is still a lot of clarity. I don't think the Pistons will be a bottom 3, seed in the East this year, but I think to expect this team to go from 14 wins to around 45 to 50 is just kind of unrealistic, and that's around where they'd need to be the 6th seed. And
Yeah.
like, you talk about, like, what's a realistic trajectory? Like, if this team were to get to 30 wins, that would be a historic jump, just for perspective. So, I think being realistic, I think fighting for the play-in and still having meaningful basketball, March and February, that's the most important thing. 6th seed this year, I just don't see it unless they make some, big move, but they're not really in a position to make a big move. So I just don't see it. Not to be a downer. It's just not realistic.
Yeah, I think to your point, like I know during the summer, a lot of people were like penciling in the Pistons to sign like Nick Claxton or Isaiah Hartenstein. Like if they would have made like big moves like that and like got rid of some of their younger guys and just said like screw it, like we're
Mhm.
trying to win. We want to get like everyone thought we were getting like Malik Monk and Nick Claxton this past
Or
summer. And
or
then
even Brandon Ingram, like, people were just penciling that
yeah.
in because Trajan Langdon came from New Orleans.
Yeah. So I don't honestly think that um a 6 seed is realistic.
Mhm.
But to your point, I don't see them being in 15th place in the Eastern Conference. If you look at the bottom of the Eastern Conference, there are some teams where I think the Pistons can kind of jump them in terms of maybe instead of 15th place, they're around that 12, 11 seed to possibly try to make a push for that play in tournament. I think that's
Mhm.
more realistic. Now, Sean, if they go to 14 to 30 wins, I'm sorry, but like JB Bickerstaff's name would probably get thrown in Coach of the Year just
Mhm.
because like
It
going
would.
like doubling your wins a little from last season and the product looks better. I think 6 seed's a little high to your point. Like this isn't going to go from 14 to 45 wins. It's just not going to. But I do think it's a realistic possibility for this team to at least try to compete with the teams that are around that 9-10 seed for the play-in tournament.
Yep. Now here's what I will say. I am confident that the Brooklyn Nets will be worse than the Detroit Pistons. I might
Mhm.
be getting myself in trouble, but there's also net fans don't exist. So what am I kidding myself? The Pistons are going to be better than the Brooklyn Nets. They are trying to lose this year. The Washington Wizards, I think they will also be better than as well. You look at, teams where it kind of gets a little bit dicey is, Toronto. What are they going to be? Because, you could see them, still being around a playing team. You could also see them being a bottom 3 team in the East. Teams like Atlanta, I could see them regressing. I could see them staying the same. Like there's a lot of teams that we still need to figure out exactly who they are. Another team that hovers around the play-in tournament around all the time as well is the Miami Heat. So like
Mhm.
it's just this is a conference that is, it's a lot deeper than it was, but there's also just a lot more question marks. Like there's like the Charlotte Hornets, they could be a bottom 3 team in the East, and I believe you. They could be a 7th or 8th seed, and I would believe it as well. Like that's just how many variables there are.
Same with the Atlanta Hawks. Like I don't
Yeah.
know if Trey Young is just going to come out, be happy because he gets the ball in his hands 24/7, or you look at their depth chart, man, like outside of like Trey Young and maybe Jalen Johnson, like who do they really have?
I will say this much. If the Atlanta Hawks take a jump this year, it won't have a damn thing to do with Zachary Risachet. Because with all due respect, Zachary Risachet is not that guy, pal. He is not that guy. Of all the
No.
years to get the number 1 overall pick, this was one of them.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it last month. They drafted a role player with the first overall pick.
Yeah. And hey, if he's a great role player and plays for the franchise for a long time and helps him maybe if he somehow helps him lift a banner someday, then that's a number 1 pick well spent. But if there is another player, below that has that type of jump, like people could say what they want about the Pistons taking Ron Holland, which I saw a Ron Holland question in the chat if you
Mhm.
wanted to answer that. But I think I think Ron Holland is higher upside than Zachary Risachet.
Yeah, same here. We will answer that Ron Allen question that you did see, and then we'll wrap this podcast up.
Sounds good.
Ryan Boseman again. Shout out to him. You know, he has not missed one of my live streams and probably since I started this YouTube channel.
What a homie.
Dude, he's an OG. Shout out to Ryan. So his question is, what do you expect from Ron Holland this year? Is he an immediate backup 3?
So that this is what's interesting because Ron Holland is the first Piston, coming in a while that isn't going to be asked to put the weight of the world in his shoulders, right?
Mhm.
Like he isn't going to be the guy that is going to be. It's not going to be like a Sar last season where you're asking him to be, your number one player on the defensive end. It's not going to be like Jaden Ivy in his rookie season where he was running the offense, or Cade Cunningham where he had to do the exact same thing. Ron Holland doesn't even necessarily have to make the rotation day one. Now, I think he will be. I think he'll probably, be your ninth or 10th guy off the bench and get 15, 20 minutes a game to start the season. I don't know if he's immediately your backup three, but that's probably where he slots in. I could also see him playing the two as well. And, with his length, who knows, maybe it could be like a small ball four as well. I think there's going to be a lot of, experimentation with Ron Holland, this year. But, I think the big thing is just, is that they don't have to put that pressure on him this year. He can, develop organically and not have to be put out there a ton day one. And I mean, listen, if they even have to send him I don't know if this is going to happen. Probably not, but even if they had to send him a little bit to the Motor City Cruise to give him more action there as well, I don't think that'd be the end of the world either. So, Ron Holland, I think he has a lot of upside of the number one picks, or of the first round picks Detroit has made over the last few years. I would say he's probably the most raw by far as first round picks goes, especially top 5. But I mean, there's a reason why the comparison, his ceiling comparison, is Jaylen Brown, and there's a reason.
Yeah, it's not because he can't dribble with his other hand. It's because
exactly. That is not the reason.
No, it's because he has all the physical makeup to possibly be a Jaylen Brown type if he hits his ceiling and he develops correctly.
Mm-hmm.
I know Ryan has really asked a lot about Ron Holland and Asar Thompson quite a bit over the past couple of months, and I'm not too sure that he's the backup 3 day one. To your point, Sean, you made a really good point. He doesn't have to start. He doesn't have to play because they brought in veterans that can basically fill the void. I know James Edwards did his depth chart, and he even said on his podcast, shout out to his podcast, the Detroit Players, basically said, would not surprise me if, Ron Holland or Bobby Klitman were in the G League. Just would not surprise. I think there could be a chance where maybe you possibly see Malik Beasley as a backup small forward.
Yep.
Maybe there's a chance you see Tim Hardaway Jr. as a backup small forward.
I mean, there's a chance that Asar's the small forward and Simone's the backup small forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a path for Ron, but listening to Trajan this summer, I think there's a very meticulous plan for how they want to develop him, how they want to use him.
Yep.
I don't think they're going to rush this process with him whatsoever.
I think he's going to be tied to the hip with Fred Vincent, and him, Asar, and Fred Vincent are all just going to become best friends this year. I think that should be the expectation. And, I think someone even brought it up in the comments as well, just about the potential of Holland and Asar together. If they do develop as shooters, that could potentially be a very lethal wing defensive duo.
I mean, if someone had said, if those two basically develop, do you have a Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum type of duo in Detroit? I don't know.
I wouldn't go that far, because that's literally one of the greatest duos in the history of basketball. But I know I'll tell you what you do have: two damn good wings, and that's what you want.
I mean, if you think about it, Sean, the last time we had a wing like that, Tayshaun Prince, maybe they could score and defend. The Pistons have really not had a good small forward on this team in quite some time. And the way the league is heading, you need those wing defenders. I don't think it's a mistake that they drafted Ron Holland and Asar in back-to-back drafts. They wanted to get better on the wing, and I think they did.
The best wing we probably had since Tayshaun Prince, funnily enough, was probably Tobias Harris or Marcus Morris.
Yeah. The Tobias Harris trade was such an underrated trade.
It was.
Urson on Brandon Jennings for Tobias was just such a steal by SVG.
Mm-hmm. That was probably SVG's best move. And then unfortunately he leveraged it into perhaps his worst move. But that's okay. We're here now.
Yeah, we're here. We're here. I just got like super depressed because I just remembered that trade. I love Blake, had a really good season here, but I'd much maybe rather have that draft pick during that draft because the 2018 draft class was so loaded.
But
Like not like
I'll say this much, the one thing that the Blake Griffin trade did bring was the Pistons needing to have an honest look at themselves,
yeah,
because for so long they tried to, continue to get to the playoffs, whatever that meant. Whereas now, even though obviously there's been some really difficult losing and it's been a difficult path, they're at the very least heading down the right direction of knowing, hey, if we want to get back to the mountaintop, you have to start from the bottom. You have to build it right, and you have to do
yeah.
it draft.
I do agree there. I think it did have to happen. I talked with Eric last week, and I told him, I said, Troy Weaver actually is still helping the Pistons. And he's like, how's that? I'm like, well, we still have protections on that Isaiah Stewart trade, so we can't trade first. Troy's still actually helping the Pistons, and he's not here anymore.
Well, and I mean, and obviously Troy, he failed to put together a competitive roster, that would help aid the young guys' development and growth. But he did bring financial flexibility. He did bring in those young players that Pistons fans do like so much. He is a good talent evaluator and a good scout of young players. He just wasn't great at constructing a roster. And I think that's where Trajan Langdon can step in and really lend a lot of his expertise, especially with Michael Blackstone, especially with a lot of the other guys that they brought in as well. I think he's a lot more, I think he has a lot more vision when it comes to salary cap and roster construction. So
I do agree. It would just be really funny if all those guys popped off, like Sasser, Jaden Ivy, Jalen Duren, all popped off, and Trajan got the credit for it when he didn't draft any of those guys.
and
You know
now
how
he's
fans are gonna be, like the casual Pistons fans, like, yeah, thank God we got Trajan. He drafted all those guys.
and now he's with Alex Sarr, Jordan Poole, and Kyle Kuzma out in Washington.
Almost Evan Fournier, but he said
And
no.
Marvin Bagley.
Shout
Yeah,
to
and Evan
Bags.
Fournier was like, I'll go play in Europe, which honestly, probably the right move. Respect.
Bro, shout out to Marvin Bagley's dad. He still follows me, even though his son's on the Wizards. Like his dad's actually a pretty cool guy.
Yeah, I liked Marvin. I thought he did, I thought he did pretty well for what he could have done in his time in Detroit. I still think bringing in, James Wiseman alongside him was probably, the biggest mistake that they made with his tenure. But at the same light, I wish him nothing but the best. I still think, I think he was given a raw deal, and he just wasn't good enough to be the number 2 pick in the draft, and that's okay.
Yeah, it happens. It happens. I mean, the Pistons have to see James Wiseman their home opener, like because he's on the Pacers now.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Yep. It's going to be interesting to see. I mean, that'll be an interesting situation.
Dude, it really will. Like I was looking, so they said that the game was sold out, and then I went to another ticket vendor, and like there's tons of tickets. I'm trying to like get you on that, but I do want to give you the floor to plug and promote, your social media, your YouTube channel. I know you talked a couple times about the pod with Mike. I'm gonna have to watch it after this is over because I didn't get a chance to actually watch it fully, but
Oh,
floor is
this
your-
man. No, I'm kidding. No, yeah, no, I really appreciate you having me on, man. You can find my podcast from Half Court on YouTube. Mainly that's where a lot of the content comes, but you can also follow me as well at Sean Half Court. Whenever I, have any interviews or, press opportunities, post a lot of the stuff there. But yeah, man, just really excited for this season. Gonna be, putting in a lot of content, and definitely will have to come back on real soon.
yeah, you gotta invite me on your show pretty soon,
I
man.
was that's literally when you clicked live earlier, I was literally in the middle of saying, I got to have you on the podcast soon. And then you're like, what's going on? Welcome to Piss. I was like, oh, all right, we're going. Here we are.
I don't actually think I've ever been on your show.
I know, we got to change that. We've done a crossover episode, but it was on this channel.
Yeah, me and Jeff played cup pong, and you and Leo hit it off, which I loved. But Jeff's like, bro, like Leo talks more than Sean does, and that's a lot. I was like, yeah, I didn't know they were gonna hit it off. My bad.
Oopsies.
It's all good, man. It's all good. I love when this people take over my podcast because I get to listen to what you have to say. But all your links are in the description below for people that are
Appreciate it, man.
watching live on YouTube. So I got your YouTube down below. Pretty sure I have your Twitter. If not, I'll go back and add it in there so they can follow you throughout the season. You do a really good job covering the Pistons.
Appreciate it, man.
Just love talking to other Pistons content creators because I think the space is big enough for both of us
Yeah.
the space is big enough for all of us to eat personally.
Absolutely.
I literally,
I think the competition stuff, like obviously, like the, wanting to people to get like to click on your stuff, obviously that is there. But I think at the same time, like you said, like there's so many different people, who do good work and cover the game well. And everyone brings their different perspectives and different, things that they see from the game. And, like I think like in particular, like you do awesome with draft content and, like with trade scenarios, like front office stuff and things like that. I think, like Koo does like a really good job of breaking down a lot of the X's and O's, a lot of the things, that go wrong in those certain things. I think, like my podcast does a good job of talking about like some like the big picture stuff and, start diving in like a little bit on the surface. But, like I think, like you said, man, there's a lot of really good content creators, a lot of people that do good work. And I think we have a really smart, in tune community that, really cares about the game. And I think everyone who covers it does it really well, especially from the angle they approach it.
Yeah, I mean, I look at guys like Wes Davenport and Blake Silverman from the Detroit Bad
Yeah.
Boys. Like
Couldn't
the pin
forget
down.
Kool-Aid as well. The,
Oh yeah,
Brandon Dent, one of the hardest working human beings alive.
yeah. I'm so happy they let Woodward Pistons be a thing, man. Like I pitched for that so hard, and they told me
Mhm.
no. And then I think Joey told me he like mentioned Woodward Pistons, and Kool-Aid's eyes got like this big. He's like, "What?
Yep.
Woodward Pistons? I want to do that." I was like, "Hey
Yep.
man, you do it. You do it." I was like, I pitched it to them for like all 4 teams.
Yep.
But I think Woodward Pistons is the only one that's still to this day still going. I see him all the time doing
Yep.
stuff with Rod Beard. Absolutely love to see it.
And he's
But
100% the reason why, because his work ethic, the things that he's been
yeah,
able to, the impact he's been able to make, he's just a top notch dude.
yeah, I mean, I don't envy him because I know how hard he has to work now. But hey, man, I'm happy that he still gets to be a beat reporter and host a show and do all that good stuff because
Mhm.
we both know how hard you have to work at that company. And like I said,
Absolutely.
it's not a job where you're getting pats on the back all the time. It's a job where you're like, oh, who tweeted this? Like, who did this? So it's just like, hey, man, like I respect it. I get it. I can honestly say I don't really miss it.
Mhm.
But we'll wrap this.
I will plead the fifth.
We'll wrap it up though, you guys. Appreciate you. See you guys next week. Hope you guys are staying safe and have a good night. Later.